My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 28 years old. And the day my parents decided to divide things fairly, they handed my brother the keys to a penthouse, skyline windows, private parking, even a concierge who knew his coffee order. Then they slid a thin envelope across the table to me, like they were doing charity work. Inside was a deed to a cracked commercial parking lot behind an abandoned strip mall on the west side of Phoenix. A piece of asphalt so empty, it still had faded arrows pointing nowhere. I stared at it, waiting for someone to explain the joke. That's when my mother smiled over her wine glass and said, "Well, at least you can sleep under the stars." My father laughed. My brother laughed harder. I didn't, because that lot came with back taxes, weeds pushing through the concrete, and a chain-link fence bent open like even the neighborhood had given up on it. They weren't giving me an opportunity. They were handing me a burden, and calling it character building. What they didn't know was that I had spent 6 years working in service bays. I learned how customers are judged the second they pull up in a dented car. How working people get overcharged because no one thinks they'll question it. And how a space, with enough pavement, water access, and stubbornness, could become something worth more than any penthouse view. They thought they were leaving me with nothing. They had no idea that months later, the same people who laughed at me would be standing on that asphalt, asking for a cut. But before I tell you what my brother said when he realized what I'd built, and what happened after I refused to give him even an inch, tell me, what time is it for you right now? And where are you watching from? I want to see how far this story travels. The next morning, I drove to the lot before sunrise. I brought a folding chair, a thermos of burnt coffee, and the kind of anger that makes you useful. In daylight, the place looked even worse. Cracked pavement, 2 dead light poles, trash wedged against the fence, and the shell of an old retail strip behind it, boarded windows, pigeons lining the roof. But I also saw the things my family would never notice. The lot had street visibility, easy pull-in access, enough room for a wash setup, and it sat close to delivery routes, rideshare traffic, and 3 neighborhoods full of people who couldn't afford dealership prices. I didn't want another cafe, boutique, or weekend market. I wanted a business that fit the ground beneath it. Something tough, something that worked. So I called Owen Brooks, the one friend I trusted to tell me the truth, even when it hurt. He'd known me since trade school. He'd watched me get passed over for promotions by men with softer hands and louder voices. When I told him I wanted to turn that empty parking lot into a women-led auto detailing and fleet care yard, a place where rideshare drivers, delivery workers, nurses, teachers, and small business owners could get honest service without being talked down to, there was a long pause. Then he said, "That is either the smartest angry decision you've ever made, or the second smartest. Either way, I'm in." We spent that first week measuring the lot, sketching traffic flow, calling plumbers, pricing water reclamation mats, and hunting down used shade structures, because Phoenix sun doesn't forgive bad planning. I used nearly all my savings just to clean the place up. Then the first setback hit: zoning. The city wouldn't allow runoff into the storm system. That meant drainage compliance, environmental controls, containment barriers, and a completely revised site plan. The estimate nearly choked me. A contractor quoted a number so high, I laughed in his face, by accident. He got offended, like I was the rude one. The second setback came when a lender looked at my application, then looked at me, and asked if there was a male operations partner he could speak to about long-term execution. I walked out before I said something expensive. That night, I sat in my car outside my apartment, gripping the steering wheel, wondering if my parents were right. Not about my worth, but about the world. Maybe they understood it perfectly. Maybe they knew some doors open automatically for my brother, and lock harder when I reach for them. But quitting would have made them right. And I refused to give them that. So I went smaller, smarter, meaner. I found a used pressure washing rig. Negotiated deferred payments on modular office containers. Started applying for workforce grants aimed at women entering skilled trades. Then I met Dana Whitmore at the permitting office, after my third failed revision. She was brisk, unsentimental, and the only city official who spoke to me like I had a future instead of a hobby. She circled 3 items on my site plan and said, "You're not far off. Stop trying to make this look pretty for people who won't save you. Make it legal, make it durable, then make it profitable." That sentence changed everything, so I stopped pitching dreams, and started building systems. Water containment, interior detailing lanes, shade coverage, fleet turnaround packages, subscription plans. A hiring model that trained women who had been told their entire lives to stay away from tools, grease, and money. Every time I got tired, I remembered my mother lifting her glass and telling me I could sleep under the stars. Fine, I thought, then I'll build something under them. My brother found out what I was doing because my parents couldn't resist turning me into a cautionary tale. He called while I was hauling broken concrete into a rented dumpster. "I heard you're opening a car wash on your little dirt kingdom," he said. "It's not a car wash," I replied. He laughed. "Sure, and my penthouse is a treehouse." That was his gift, making contempt sound casual. Like cruelty was just another polished accessory. A week later, they invited me to dinner. I should have known better. I walked in tired, sunburned, still smelling faintly of degreaser, and straight into a performance. My brother had invited 2 friends from his office. Before the salads even arrived, my father asked, in that soft, performative voice, "So, how's the parking lot project?" My brother leaned back. "Dad, don't call it a project. Naomi is revolutionizing asphalt." Everyone laughed. Except me. Then my mother added, "We do worry about how this looks. You've always been so intense. Not hardworking. Not determined. Intense. The family word for a woman who doesn't stay grateful." I should have left, but something in me wanted them to hear themselves, while I was still sitting there. So I asked, "How exactly does my business embarrass you more than giving one child a penthouse, and the other a tax bill?" That shut the table up. For a second, then my brother smiled, the kind of smile people use right before they stab you politely. "Because I can maintain what I'm given," he said. "You turn everything into a fight." I walked out before dessert. But not before my mother called after me, "You always choose drama." That sentence stayed with me all week. Because it was the clearest summary of favoritism I had ever heard. The favored child gets to create damage, and call it personality. The other child reacts to it, and gets called dramatic. Tell me that isn't true in more families than people admit. But humiliation can be useful, if you know what to do with it. The next day, I pitched my business to a workforce development panel, and nearly blew it. My voice shook. My slides froze. One committee member asked if there was enough demand for premium detailing. I almost snapped. Almost said that this is exactly why working people get ignored, because the moment they aren't luxury clients, people assume they don't deserve quality. Instead, I took a breath, and answered with numbers. Rideshare volume, fleet turnover, service gaps, recurring packages, labor demand, training shortages for women in skilled trades. I walked out convinced I had failed. 3 days later, I got the call. Partial grant approved. Not enough to make things easy, but enough to make them possible. Owen whooped so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Then came Victor Salazar, a retired mechanic with a reputation so solid, half the neighborhood still called him before buying a used car. He showed up one afternoon, watched me struggle with a hose line for 2 full minutes, and said, "You're doing that wrong." I told him he could keep walking. He grinned, fixed it in 10 seconds, and stayed for 4 hours. Victor didn't do pity, he respected work. By the end of the month, we had a name, Second Shift Auto Yard. Because most of our customers were people whose real lives started after everyone else clocked out. Nurses, delivery drivers, single moms, teachers, people who depended on their cars to survive. I hired my first 2 trainees, both women who had been told this industry wasn't for them. And when they picked up their first polishers, like they belong there, something inside me cracked open. Not revenge, something better, proof. Of course, every good step forward seemed to wake up new resistance. Materials got delayed. A supplier backed out. A portable office arrived with a broken lock. Then, one morning, someone cut our temporary water line, just enough to flood part of the lot. Could have been kids, Owen said. Maybe, but I had spent my whole life around a different kind of sabotage. The kind that shows up later, smiling, and asks how things are going. We opened on a brutal Saturday in late May. 3 shade canopies, 2 detailing lanes, 1 small office container, a hand-painted sign, and more fear than money. By 8 a.m., there were already 6 cars lined up. Victor had quietly spread the word. And the neighborhood showed up the way communities do when they see someone building something that belongs to them. By noon, the lot that once looked abandoned, sounded alive. Hoses spraying, vacuums humming, customers laughing under the shade. Music crackling from an old speaker Owen had zip-tied to a post. Nothing was elegant yet, but all of it was real. That's when I realized, success doesn't always arrive with a dramatic moment. Sometimes, it sounds like people trusting you with something they use every day. And of course, that's exactly when my brother showed up.